Why go to these trees? Why cut them down? Is it to destroy the superstitious? Is it to destroy the sacred? Welcome to Ostracon, a podcast that translates fragments into the whole from which they came. Today we're thinking about two ancient trees, and how are they the same and how are they different? First, Saint Boniface. Saint Boniface was born in England around the mid-600s and lived to the mid-700s. He was sent on mission to evangelize Europe, mainly the areas around modern-day Germany. And you should note, because it might be relevant to our second tree, that at these early dates, Catholicism was so well established in the British Isles that they were sending missionaries to mainland Europe to evangelize. While he was in modern-day Germany, Boniface encountered a common practice of worshiping sacred trees and sacred groves, particularly one especially large and ancient tree called the Donar Oak, which was probably located somewhere just outside of Fritzlar in Germany. Intending to disprove that the tree was magical or that a spirit lived in it, Boniface cut the tree down, and he was not struck down for doing so. The wood of the tree was used to build a church near the site. This episode is one of the most famous of St. Boniface's life, and his intent was to demonstrate the falsity of superstition in favor of the gospel. But now let's think about another tree, the Glastonbury Thorn. England is rich with ancient legends about Joseph of Arimathea. There's no way to know if they're true, and I defer to experts in that space, but my understanding is from round about the 500s and 600s, there's stories and legends that attest to Joseph of Arimathea as being one of the early Christians to evangelize the British Isles. In fact, in the Grail legends, he's the one that brings the Grail to England. And while there's a number of reasons to doubt that, maybe the stories attributed the Grail to him because there was such a strong and lasting belief that he really was there. The story of the Glastonbury Thorn also relates to Joseph of Arimathea. The story goes that he stuck his staff into the ground, and that this flowering thorn tree, I think it's a hawthorn, grew from his staff. It was a bifloral tree, which means that it bloomed twice, in the summer and also at Christmas. And there is a long-standing, in fact a continued practice, of sending flowering sprigs from the tree to the British monarch at Christmas. The tree survived the dissolution of the monasteries under Henry VIII. So Glastonbury Abbey is a ruin. But the tree was not cut down. In fact, it survived until the mid-1600s, about 1,000 years after Boniface, and it was cut down during the English Civil War. Now, there's a lot that could be said about that conflict, but at the risk of being incomplete, I'll give this brief description. The Civil War was largely a dispute between Parliament and the king about their relative powers, and it was the circumstances that gave rise to Oliver Cromwell, and to a period where Parliament exercised control over England in the absence of a king. But these disputes about political power were also overlaid with religious tensions. It was not all that long after Elizabeth I, who had cemented her position as queen and descent from Henry VIII by cementing a state religion of Protestantism. And there were suspicions at the time that Charles I had Catholic sympathies. He had married a Catholic. Charles I was actually executed, and Charles II, his descendant, escaped from England, of all things, hiding in a tree while he was being searched for. But he did escape, and he would eventually return and ascend the throne and restore the monarchy. His younger brother was actually the last Catholic monarch of England. But it was in the context of the Civil War and before the return of Charles II that the Glastonbury Thorn was cut down. It's believed by someone sympathetic to Parliament and Protestantism and opposed to the superstitious aura of the tree that was akin to the superstitions attributed to Catholicism at that time. So let me ask you, are these trees the same? Are they different? When it comes to superstition, we have to say no. But when it comes to the sacred, we have to say yes. And what might the sacred be? Could it be anything mysterious and beautiful that turns our mind to God? Could it be an ancient, mysterious tree whose beauty and history brings us awe? Maybe the defining line is that the sacred is a route to the true, but not to the false. And of course, it can never itself be an idol. Think of the relics of the church, for example, which bring us in direct contact with the truth of the church as the body of Christ, as a real thing with history and real people who made extraordinary sacrifices for their faith. But all of these things are a route to the true, to God. They are never themselves worshipped. While you're ruminating on that, let me share the end of the story for the Glastonbury Thorn. There were a number of cuttings that were taken from the original tree before it was cut down, and they were propagated, and in fact, in the 1950s, a new Glastonbury Thorn was planted that was understood to be from a cutting of the ancient tree that was cut down. The flowering branches that they send the monarch at Christmas now are from trees propagated by these cuttings. In 2010, the new Glastonbury thorn tree, planted in the 50s, was vandalized when most of its limbs were cut off. Then, in 2019, it was removed entirely. From reading some of the local news sources, it seems like there was a debate about what to do with the dead wood of the tree and how to preserve it almost like a relic. And today, even though the tree is dead and gone, people go to the site where it was and leave tokens. Why go to these trees? Why cut them down? Is it to destroy the superstitious? Is it to destroy the sacred? Why is it a tree that features in the story of the fall? And what of the cross, also called the tree of life, the wood of a tree on which Christ is crucified, the first fruits offered to God, the first of the resurrection?